Is Alex Murdaugh guilty of murdering his wife and son? Hi, everybody. It's Harvard lawyer Lee. Here are the 10 most important pieces of evidence that the state has presented in its case in chief. Alex Murdaugh was a highly successful and well thought of lawyer in the South Carolina Lowcountry. The Murdaugh name was revered because Alex's father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather before him had been well-respected lawyers, and in fact have been the prosecutors in the area. Now Alex Murdaugh has been disbarred. He's under indictment. He's facing potentially life in prison, accused of 99 financial crimes that include stealing from his own clients, from his own law firm, and tax evasion. But right now he's in even worse trouble than that. He is accused of killing his wife, Maggie, and his 22-year-old son, Paul. We're in the middle of trial in Colleton County, South Carolina. The prosecution rested on Friday, and the defense begins its case next. So what's the evidence against Alex Murdaugh? Did he do it? The state does not have a smoking gun, or even a gun for that matter. One gun was used to kill Maggie and another to kill Paul, which instantly led many people to suspect there were two different shooters involved. The state insists that Alex Murdaugh personally shot both, but the state has not been able to locate and definitively ID either gun. The state also says that the killer would have had bloody clothes. Law enforcement tested the clothes Alex Murdaugh was wearing when they arrived, and although they did alert as presumptively positive for blood, they ultimately did not test positive for blood. So what evidence does the state have? Here you go, the top 10 pieces of evidence. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We cover legal news and we're covering this trial every day at 7 p.m. I'd love to see you back for more videos. Number 1, Paul's Kennel video. The number 1 most important piece of evidence is a video on the phone of Alex Murdaugh's murdered son, Paul. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were shot on the Murdaugh large hunting property. They were by the dog kennels, which was quite a distance from the house. Alex Murdaugh told police and several close friends that he was at the house napping and he didn't go down to the kennels with his wife and son after dinner. But Paul's friend Rogan Gibson says he heard Alex's voice in the background while he was FaceTiming Paul shortly before the murders. Numerous prosecution witnesses have identified Alex Murdaugh's voice in the background in a video Paul filmed a matter of mere minutes before he was killed to send to Rogan. Number 2, how long was Alex Murdaugh at his mother's house? Murdaugh says when he woke from his nap, he went to see his mother, who has Alzheimer's. Depending on the interview, he said he was at his mother's house from 35 minutes to an hour. The caregiver and the OnStar data for his vehicle say the visit was more like 20 minutes. The caregiver says that Alex told her he thought he had been there 45 minutes. She says he offered to help her get a job with the school system and to help pay for her upcoming wedding. She felt he was pressuring her to claim he had been there longer than he really had been. Number 3, the blood on the shotgun. When Alex arrived back to the Moselle property after visiting his mother, he says he went to the house, realized Maggie and Paul still weren't there, and then went down to the kennels to see what was taking so long. That's when he found the bodies. He says he was afraid the killers were still around, so he went back to the house to get a 12-gauge shotgun to defend himself. A small amount of Maggie's blood was found on the barrel of the gun, and a drop was found on the steering wheel of Alex's car. On the 911 call, Alex told the dispatcher he had touched Maggie's body, so the defense may argue that the blood came when he touched her with his hand and with the gun. And additionally, Maggie was not shot with the same kind of gun Alex was holding. So the fact that the gun he was holding had her blood on it is probably more confusing than it is helpful. Number 4, the deleted phone calls. Because he was an attorney, Alex's phone had parts deleted to protect the attorney-client privilege before it was handed to law enforcement. But the prosecution also said that Alex's phone had gaps on the night of June 7th where it believes data was manually deleted, even the evidence of his alibi. Number 5, the Snapchat video and the new clothes. Before the murders, Alec rode around the property with his son Paul, who would die of brutal gunshot wounds just a matter of hours later. While he was hanging out with his dad, Paul took a Snapchat video. Neither Paul nor Alec seems tense, and they seem to be getting along. Alec told investigators the two had been riding around for an hour and a half to 2 hours, but the time may have been actually less. But more importantly, Alec was wearing khaki pants and a blue button-up shirt in that video. When the police arrived, he was wearing a white t-shirt and dark shorts. Police did not ask Alec about the Snapchat video until 2 months later, and by that time, he, not surprisingly, did not remember when he had changed. The state contends the clothes were missing from then on, from the time of the murders on, offering the testimony of Alec's housekeeper, who said she never saw the shirt again. But her testimony is clouded by the fact that she thought he was wearing a different shirt when he left for work in the morning, by the fact that it was just a generic blue button-up shirt, by the fact that he never really lived in a spot where the housekeeper was his housekeeper again, and by the fact that she, in fact, did find khaki pants on the floor by the shower the next day, and she didn't notice any blood on them. Number 6, the missing Blackout Gun. Maggie was shot by a .300 Blackout, and the Murdaughs did own Blackout guns. Several years before the murders, the Murdaughs bought a .300 Blackout for each of their sons as a Christmas gift. Paul's Blackout was stolen out of his unlocked truck while he was at a party, and the Murdaughs replaced it with another, less expensive version. Paul's second Blackout is now also missing. Alec told law enforcement he did not remember seeing the gun at Christmas, but Paul's friend Nolan Tootin remembered seeing the gun in March, which was 2 to 3 months before the murders, which happened on June 7th, 2021. So it's unclear when the second Blackout went missing. Paul's truck was in the shop the Friday before the murders, and it's possible the guns were in the truck and stolen at that time. In any event, the one remaining Blackout that the Murdaughs still do have belonged to son Buster, and it's not the gun that shot Maggie. So this evidence is ambiguous. Number 7, the shotgun shell markings. Investigators found shells with specific indentations beside Maggie's body. They found similar indentations on older shells outside the house near the entrance to the gun room and at the shooting range on the Murdaugh hunting property. The prosecution says this proves that the gun that killed Maggie had been on the property before, which makes it more likely it was one of Paul's missing guns. But whether the markings on those shells are unique to a particular gun is hotly contested by the defense. Number 8, the blue tarp rain jacket. The caregiver for Alex's mother says that about a week after the murders, Alec came into the house carrying a balled-up blue tarp. Investigators did not find this out until months later. Then they searched the mother's house and found a blue tarp folded on top of a box of china and a blue plastic rain jacket balled up in the bottom of the closet. Since the caregiver had described the blue tarp as being balled up, South Carolina law enforcement, or SLED, tested the rain jacket, but they did not test the tarp. The jacket had no blood and no DNA, but it did have gunshot residue. Since gunshot residue lasts essentially forever, unless it's wiped off, the state's gunshot residue expert was unable to state when the gunshot residue got on the jacket. Number 9, gunshot residue. Investigators tested Alec and the clothes he was wearing when law enforcement first arrived. Alec had 1 particle of gunshot residue on his hand, a very few on his shorts and shirt, and none on his shoes. Investigators found 1 particle on his seatbelt buckle. Expert Megan Fletcher for the state admitted those were low findings and could have come just from handling a gun. The defense points out that Alec was holding a 12-gauge shotgun when law enforcement arrived because, as he told the 911 dispatcher, he wanted a gun for protection in case the killer was still on the property. Number 10, the close timing. GM OnStar data and cell phone data shows that by 9:02, Alex Murdaugh was walking, probably for his car, and he left for his mother's house at 9:06. Maggie's cell phone showed movement as late as 8:49 or even as late as 8:55. Paul texted a friend at 8:48. The state claims Alex Murdaugh murdered his wife and son and cleaned up at the kennels in that roughly 12-minute period. They point to water on the floor of the kennels, although water is clearly on the ground in the infamous kennel video that Paul took at about 8:44. So some water was already there when Paul and Maggie were still alive. OnStar data confirms that Alex Murdaugh began driving to his mother's house at 9:06, talking to people on the drive over and the drive back. He had about 1 to 2 minutes extra when he arrived at his mother's house before the caregiver let him in, and a little less than a minute when he stopped in the driveway as he started the drive back to the Moselle Hunting Lodge. The defense says that's not much time to hide guns and bloody clothes. And then there's the matter of the just 20 seconds that Alex Murdaugh had between the time that he arrived at the kennels and the time that he called 911. The prosecution says that's not enough time to register the fact that your wife and son have been shot, much less to have attempted to take their pulse and to turn them over as he says he did. The defense is probably going to say that he didn't do those things until after he talked to 911. The big question that many people are still asking, even after the state's case, is what's the motive? What would make a successful attorney suddenly turn on his own wife and child? The prosecution argues that Alex Murdaugh was under significant financial pressure. He apparently had an opioid addiction that was costing him millions of dollars a year, and he had been stealing from clients and his law firm to finance it. The day of the murders, his law firm CFO confronted him with a missing $792,000 attorney's fee. He also had been stealing money from his own clients, taking the money they received as settlements. The prosecution argues that Alex Murdaugh was trying to distract people from his financial crimes, hoping to buy time before the axe fell. So what do you think so far? What kind of evidence do you think the defense needs to submit in its phase of the case? We're covering this case every night of the trial live at 7. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe. I'll see you back.